Black woman exposes cops' lies in court, revealing her role in U.S. intelligence. A hush settled over the packed courtroom. Spectators held their breath as they watched the intense gaze of Amelia Jefferson, a poised black woman in a perfectly tailored suit, stare down the police officer who had accused her of a crime she vehemently denied committing. The officer's confident smirk faltered as Amelia's words cut through the silence, exposing the glaring inconsistencies in his testimony. She had endured weeks of public humiliation and blatant injustice, but as Amelia took a slow, measured step forward to reveal her true identity, a respected member of a top U.S. intelligence agency, the stunned crowd knew the tide had shifted. Amelia Jefferson's life changed in an instant on a warm June evening. The familiar hum of late-night traffic filled the air as she walked home from her best friend Sharice's birthday dinner in downtown Atlanta. It had been a night of laughter, dancing, and catching up, and Amelia's cheeks still felt warm from the lively conversation and a cocktail or two. The city lights shimmered against the Georgia skyline, casting a soft glow on Amelia's freshly twisted braids. She clutched her purse close, feeling the familiar weight of her phone inside. Her fiancé, Jordan, was away on a business trip, and she had text messages from him waiting. If all went smoothly, she'd be home in 20 minutes. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn. A patrol car cruised down the empty stretch of road, its headlights flashing in short bursts. Just a couple more blocks, and she'd reach the secure entrance of her apartment complex. Then, a sharp wail from the sirens sliced through the night. She froze, her heart pounding, as the police vehicle pulled up to the curb. A tall, broad-shouldered white officer stepped out, his face unreadable. Amelia had done nothing wrong, but confusion and a creeping sense of unease took hold. "Ma'am," he said, his tone stiff. "Stop right there." It was an order, not a request, and Amelia's instincts flared. Something about his demeanor set her on edge. Over the years, she had learned to trust her intuition. Still, she complied, turning fully to face him with her hands raised slightly in a non-threatening gesture. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. His nameplate read Officer Reese. He circled her slowly, shining his flashlight in her face without a shred of courtesy, making her squint. "We got a report of a woman matching your description causing trouble in this neighborhood," he said flatly. Amelia's jaw tightened. She pressed her lips together, forcing herself to stay calm. "Trouble?" she echoed. "I'm just walking home. You might have the wrong person." Reese shifted, his gaze raking over her as if waiting for her to make the wrong move. "I'm gonna need to see some ID," he said. Amelia moved cautiously, reaching into her bag at a deliberate pace. She had no intention of making sudden movements, especially with the way the officer was watching her. Handing over her driver's license, she noticed the faint scowl deepening across his face. He pulled out his phone and stepped away. Amelia glanced around. No witnesses, no pedestrians. The moment felt unnaturally tense. When Reese returned, something had changed. A smirk tugged at his lips, self-satisfied. "Ma'am," he drawled, "I need to ask you some questions about a break-in reported earlier tonight." Amelia's pulse quickened. A break-in? She had spent the entire evening at the restaurant, surrounded by friends who could vouch for her whereabouts. But something in the officer's posture told her he had already made up his mind. "Officer, I was downtown celebrating my friend's birthday. I just got out of an Uber 2 blocks from here because of the traffic. You can call Sharice or check with the restaurant. I have receipts," Amelia said, her voice measured but firm. Reese tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he was determined to solve. "People lie to cover their tracks," he said coolly. "I have probable cause. You fit the description. Hand over your purse." A cold wave of anxiety washed over Amelia. Every instinct told her this wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. This was profiling. But she was no ordinary civilian. She had training she couldn't reveal just yet. With deliberate calm, she unzipped her bag and handed it over, watching as Reese rummaged through it. He pulled out her phone, keys, a lipstick, a slim wallet. Slowly, as if expecting to uncover something incriminating, He inspected every pocket and seam. Nothing. His smirk faded, but instead of backing down, he looked irritated, as if he was frustrated that he hadn't found anything to justify his suspicion. "Looks clean," he admitted, though it seemed to pain him. "Still, I need you to come down to the station to give a statement." Amelia's mind raced. She had done nothing wrong. She knew her rights, and she also knew what happened when people were taken to the station without representation. "Am I under arrest?" she asked, her voice steady. "You're being detained for questioning," Reese replied evasively. "Not sure yet if I have enough to charge you." Amelia took a slow breath. She prayed that reason would prevail, that this officer would see sense. But the look on his face told her he had no intention of letting her walk away. As Officer Reese reached for a pair of handcuffs, Amelia felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. When the cold metal snapped around her wrists, a tremor of fear ran through her. She had never been on this side of the law, the very system she had sworn to uphold and protect. Yet here she was, a lone black woman in the darkness, cuffed by an officer who seemed all too eager to see her behind bars. She was placed in the back of the patrol car, the stale scent of rubber and sweat filling her senses as the engine roared to life and they pulled away. Amelia stared out the window, her thoughts racing. If this officer had already decided she was guilty, her only hope lay in the truth she carried, her real identity. Yet revealing it would be a last resort. Protocol demanded secrecy, even as her life seemed to be spiraling out of control. Word of Amelia Jefferson's arrest spread quickly among her friends. Charisse, the last person to see Amelia at the birthday dinner, panicked when Amelia never made it home. She called Amelia's phone repeatedly, but there was no answer. Meanwhile, Amelia's fiancé, Jordan, was already on his way back from his business trip in Chicago. The moment he heard the news, he began frantically trying to reach her. At the precinct, Amelia sat in a dimly lit interrogation room. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting a dull yellowish glow. Outside the door, Officer Reese was deep in conversation with another officer. Through the thin walls, Amelia caught snippets of their words. Phrases like probable cause, resisting, and typical suspect. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table as she fought to maintain her composure. A short time later, the door swung open, and a weary-looking detective with salt and pepper hair and dark circles under his eyes stepped inside. He carried a file in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. His nameplate read, Detective Morrow. He gave Amelia a curt nod before sitting across from her, studying her intently. "Miss Jefferson," Detective Morrow began, his tone measured, "I understand you were stopped by Officer Reese in connection to a break-in reported in this neighborhood. The homeowner claims they saw a woman leaving the scene. We have limited witness testimony." Amelia inhaled slowly. She had nothing to hide, but she was cautious about what she revealed. "I have an alibi, Detective," she said evenly. "I was at a birthday dinner downtown for most of the evening. I can give you the names of my friends, and the restaurant has security cameras. They can confirm I was there. I have receipts. I'm innocent." Detective Morrow took a sip of his coffee, then set it down. His expression remained neutral, but Amelia sensed a flicker of sympathy behind his tired eyes. "That's what we're trying to figure out," he said. "Officer Reese claims you matched the description perfectly and that you acted suspiciously when approached." A spark of frustration ignited in Amelia's chest. "I only asked if I was under arrest. There's nothing suspicious about knowing my rights," she countered. Detective Morrow flipped through the file in front of him. Amelia caught a glimpse of its contents. A grainy photo of a woman in a dark hoodie, accompanied by a brief summary of the break-in. The homeowner described a woman around 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 10 inches with braids, Morrow said, his voice carrying a hint of doubt. "Pretty vague, if you ask me. And you're not wearing a hoodie or carrying any stolen property. So far, the evidence is circumstantial at best." Relief flickered within Amelia, but she knew better than to let her guard down. Officer Reese's personal determination to pin this on her could still cause trouble. "You can hold me," she said carefully, keeping her tone neutral. but it won't change the fact that I was somewhere else entirely. If you check the restaurant's security footage, you'll see that." Detective Morrow studied her face for a moment, as if weighing her sincerity. "All right," he said finally. "Let's get that footage, talk to your friends, and see what checks out." He pushed back his chair and stood. As Amelia watched him leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about this entire situation was off. The tension in the precinct was unusually thick, as though her presence had stirred something deeper. Through the small window in the door, she saw Officer Reese standing with his arms crossed, glaring at her. She didn't know what personal vendetta he might have, but she was certain this was about more than just a break-in. An hour later, an officer begrudgingly informed her that she would be released if her alibi checked out. She was instructed to stay within city limits in case they needed to question her again. As Amelia stepped out of the holding area, Charisse was waiting for her in the lobby, tears in her eyes. They hugged tightly, Amelia fighting the overwhelming weight of what she had just endured. "Girl, let's get you home," Charisse whispered. "I'm so sorry." Amelia nodded, exhaustion seeping into her bones. She was grateful for Charisse's presence, but her mind replayed every moment of the night. The unjust stop, the accusatory gleam in Officer Reese's eyes, the humiliation of the handcuffs, the long hours in that room. Reese's hostility still lingered in her memory. Amelia vowed to keep an eye on him. As Amelia stepped out of the station, she looked up at the glowing neon sign that read Atlanta Police Department, Zone 5. It shone in the darkness like a lingering reminder of the night's events. She was free for now, but she had a new mission. She needed the truth to come to light, not just for herself, but for the countless others whose voices never escaped the confines of an interrogation room. Amelia Jefferson's path to that claustrophobic room had been anything but typical. A proud graduate of Howard University, she had studied criminology and computer science, driven by an unshakable sense of justice. After applying to several agencies, she underwent an exhaustive and highly confidential process before securing a position in a specialized division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. From the beginning of her career, Amelia had demonstrated an exceptional aptitude for intelligence analysis and undercover operations. She transitioned seamlessly between roles, proving her worth in high-pressure situations that required quick thinking, emotional resilience, and a talent for blending in. Yet, she never flaunted her FBI credentials. Secrecy was an essential part of her job. To friends and family, she simply worked as a consultant in data security. Jordan, her fiancé, knew her work involved something more sensitive. He had gathered as much from her unpredictable hours and hushed phone calls, but she kept the official details strictly under wraps. The only tangible proof of her true profession was a single black and white photograph locked in her desk drawer at home. Amelia standing in front of the FBI Academy entrance in Quantico, Virginia. The memory of her training filled her with pride, reinforcing the sense of duty that had shaped every major decision in her life. When she had been forced into that squad car, conflicting instincts had waged war inside her. A part of her had wanted to flash her badge, reveal her credentials, and immediately put the power-hungry Officer Reese in his place. But she knew better. Local law enforcement officers weren't typically aware of specialized FBI personnel, and revealing her status prematurely could jeopardize ongoing investigations. Every fiber of her being told her to wait, to let the local system play its course, unless she had no other choice but to unmask herself. The next morning, Amelia awoke to the relentless buzzing of her phone. She had missed multiple calls and voicemails from Jordan. She immediately called him back. Baby, are you okay?" His voice was taut with worry. "I got in late last night and went straight to your place, but you were already asleep." Amelia exhaled, half in relief. "I'm okay now. It was a mess at the station." She recounted the encounter, her voice tight with residual anger and frustration. Jordan's tone darkened. "I can't believe they did that to you," he said, his voice hard with restrained fury. "And that officer, he has no idea who he's messing with." Amelia closed her eyes. She understood his outrage. He knew enough about her real job to recognize she wasn't someone to be easily intimidated. But she also knew that revealing her identity too soon could escalate the situation in the worst possible way. She wanted the truth to surface properly, through official channels, not in the heat of the moment. "I'm meeting with an attorney this afternoon," she told him. "I need to be proactive. Even if they don't have real evidence, I don't want to take any chances. And I need to file a complaint against Reese." There was no justification for how he handled my arrest. Jordan immediately agreed, promising to go with her. Before they ended the call, he reminded her that they were in this together. His unwavering support grounded her. That afternoon, Amelia and Jordan drove to a well-respected law office downtown. The attorney, Linda Polk, had come highly recommended by one of Amelia's sorority sisters. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a keen eye for dismantling weak prosecutions. As they sat at a polished oak table, Amelia recounted every detail of the arrest, Linda listening intently as she jotted down notes. "You were never read your Miranda rights?" Linda asked, pressing her pen firmly to the page. Amelia shook her head. "No. Reese just cuffed me and said I was being taken in for questioning. He never told me I had the right to remain silent." Linda exchanged a knowing look with Amelia, confirming the seriousness of the violation. "I'll look into that," she said. "For now, rest assured, there isn't enough evidence here for any legitimate charge. If the police try to push forward with this, we'll demand a formal hearing." A tight knot in Amelia's chest loosened. She flashed Linda a grateful smile. "Thank you. The worst part is knowing that so many people go through this and don't have the resources or support. It's not right." Linda patted Amelia's hand reassuringly. "One step at a time. Let's get you squared away first. Then we'll see what else can be done." As Amelia and Jordan left the law office, she couldn't shake the sense that Officer Reese's unrelenting certainty about her guilt was a warning sign, a problem that hadn't been resolved yet. On the drive home, Jordan maneuvered through Atlanta's congested streets while Amelia stared out the window, her mind drifting to the locked drawer in her bedroom. Inside was her black leather credential case, proof that she was an agent in a highly specialized FBI unit. She had never imagined needing it to defend herself against a local cop's prejudice or corruption. But with every new turn of events, it became increasingly clear that if push came to shove, Amelia might have no choice but to do just that. Days passed, turning into a week, and Amelia did her best to resume a semblance of normalcy. She returned to her daily responsibilities, careful to avoid conversations about the incident. But beneath the surface, she remained on high alert. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. The situation with coworkers and acquaintances became increasingly complicated. Although Amelia's humiliating arrest hadn't made local headlines, Atlanta was a vast city, and her case was just one among many. Word spread within her circle. Outraged friends voiced their support, some even posting about it online, calling for action against racial profiling. Her phone constantly buzzed with messages of solidarity. Her family, however, remained largely unaware. Amelia's mother, who lived in a small town just outside Birmingham, Alabama, would worry herself sick if she knew the full extent of what had happened. For now, Amelia kept the details vague. There was no need to add to her mother's concerns, especially since she believed the issue would be resolved soon. Then, one afternoon, Amelia's world shifted again. As she stepped out of her apartment building, heading to a scheduled meeting with Linda, she noticed a police cruiser parked across the street. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Officer Reese was in the driver's seat, his gaze locked onto her. The moment their eyes met, he spoke into his radio and then pulled away. Amelia watched as the vehicle disappeared around the corner, her pulse quickening. Was he stalking her? Trying to intimidate her? The sheer audacity of it made her blood boil, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. She wouldn't be bullied into silence. At Linda's office, Amelia recounted the incident. "That's harassment," Linda said, her expression darkening. "If it happens again, document it. Date, time, location, keep a record. If we need to escalate your complaint, this will be important." The tension only grew when Amelia met with Detective Marrow the next day. He had asked her to come in to finalize her statement, assuring her it was just a formality. I reviewed the footage from that restaurant, Marrow said, leaning back in his chair. It confirms that you were there for most of the evening. There was no opportunity for you to commit this crime. A wave of relief washed over Amelia. So that means I'm cleared? Marrow pressed his lips together. As far as I'm concerned, you won't be tied to the break-in case. However, Officer Reese is now claiming that you resisted arrest. He's filed a separate report stating that you acted aggressively, used abusive language, and threatened him. Amelia's jaw dropped, her heartbeat hammering in her ears. That's a complete lie, she said firmly. I was never aggressive. I asked him if I was under arrest, that's it. I didn't threaten him. There should be body cam footage to disprove this, she added, grasping for any shred of evidence that could clear her. Marrow nodded. I requested the footage, but… He exhaled sharply. It's missing. A wave of nausea rolled through Amelia. Missing. How convenient for Officer Reese. Her hands clenched into fists, anger and helplessness swirling inside her. Look, Marrow said, lowering his voice. I don't like this any more than you do. If we push hard enough, internal affairs might get involved. Off the record, Reese has had complaints against him before. His file is clean on paper, but there are rumors that not all of his body cam footage makes it into evidence. Amelia's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about her arrest anymore. It was about a system that enabled officers like Reese to fabricate reports and evade accountability. She thought about all the faces she had seen on the news, black men and women wrongfully accused or worse. That night in the squad car, she had felt just a fraction of that fear. And now she realized she was in a position to do something about it. As she stepped out of the precinct, Amelia forced herself to stay calm, but fury burned in her chest. A false charge of resisting arrest could have devastating consequences, personally, professionally, and financially. She could not let this go unchallenged. When she got home, she locked the door and went straight to her desk. Opening the drawer, she reached for the black leather credential case inside. The raised gold letters, Federal Bureau of Investigation, gleamed under the light. Her reflection in the polished surface stared back at her. She looked determined, perhaps even a little afraid, but she would not back down. If Officer Reese insisted on lying, then she would reveal the truth. She had played by the rules, kept her cover intact. But now she was cornered, and she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the countless others who didn't have a badge in their drawer to protect them. 3 days later, Amelia's phone rang. It was Linda. Amelia, Linda began, her tone serious. It looks like the district attorney's office is considering pressing charges for resisting arrest, based on Reese's report. Amelia felt her stomach drop. Linda, this is insane, she said, gripping the phone. I have no criminal record. I didn't resist anything. How does this make any sense? Linda sighed. Reese is claiming that you tried to flee and nearly knocked him over in the process. And with no body cam footage to contradict him, it's his word against yours. Amelia's mind raced. No body cam footage. No way to disprove his lies, unless she used the one thing that could flip the case entirely. She hesitated for only a moment before saying, Linda, I think I have a way to fight this, but it involves sensitive information about my background. Pause crackled through the line. I wasn't sure if I should bring this up before, Amelia continued, taking a steadying breath. But I'm not just a consultant. I'm with the FBI. Silence. Then, what? Linda practically yelped. Please, keep your voice down, Amelia said, despite knowing Linda was alone in her office. I don't work for a regular department. It's a specialized unit. But yes, I'm a federal agent. A low whistle came through the receiver. Amelia, Linda murmured, that changes everything. If we can prove that you have extensive knowledge of law enforcement procedures, it completely undermines the idea that you would resist arrest. You'd know the smartest move is to remain calm and comply, unless, of course, you were being ambushed. Amelia exhaled, the weight of her decision settling on her shoulders. Still, Linda continued cautiously, we'll have to be strategic about how we use this information. Amelia nodded, gripping the credential case in her lap. Agreed. This situation could work in Amelia's favor, or it could escalate into something even bigger, especially if the local police department felt that the feds were encroaching on their territory. Amelia knew that was a risk. "It's a last resort, Linda," she said, "but I'm prepared if it comes to that. For now, I want to gather as much evidence as possible through standard channels. If that doesn't work, we'll reveal my credentials." Linda agreed, and they ended the call with a plan to continue investigating. Amelia closed her eyes, leaning against the wall for support. Everything was unfolding too fast. Every step she took seemed to drag her deeper into treacherous waters. Over the following week, Amelia and Linda searched for any potential witnesses. Charisse Jordan, a close friend who had dropped Amelia off a few blocks from home, offered to testify about her calm demeanor that evening. The restaurant staff also confirmed that Amelia had been in good spirits and had left without any signs of distress. However, no one had been present on the street during the actual arrest. Amelia felt the walls closing in. Officer Reese's fabricated account, combined with the conveniently missing body cam footage, made her innocence feel like a precarious thing. Then, on a humid Tuesday morning, Amelia was summoned for her first court hearing. She arrived with Linda at her side. The courtroom was modest. Rows of wooden benches, harsh fluorescent lighting overhead, and the judge's bench elevated at the front. Amelia's pulse quickened as she spotted Officer Reese sitting with the prosecution. His smug grin made her skin crawl. He shot her a quick glance, as if reveling in his belief that victory was within his grasp. The hearing began. The prosecution laid out the charge of resisting arrest and disturbing the peace. Amelia forced herself to remain composed as they recounted her alleged attempt to flee and her supposed hostility toward Reese. Linda then presented Amelia's defense. A woman with a spotless record, an upstanding member of the community, and a professional with no reason to resist arrest. She formally requested the body cam footage, only for the prosecutor to claim that it was unavailable due to a technical malfunction. Amelia clenched her fists beneath the table. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, looked conflicted. "Without the body cam footage, we are left with only statements and circumstantial evidence," he said. "Miss Jefferson's alibi for the break-in is solid, so that is not at issue here. This case hinges solely on her behavior during the arrest." Linda's voice was steady but firm. "Your Honor, I believe there are discrepancies in Officer Reese's report. My client did not resist arrest. We strongly suspect that the missing body cam footage would confirm that, if it hadn't conveniently disappeared." The prosecutor immediately objected to Linda's wording, leading to a tense back and forth between both sides. Meanwhile, Amelia observed Reese's body language, relaxed, confident, almost arrogant. He lounged back in his chair like a cat that had its prey cornered. A flicker of anger burned in her chest, but a sense of calm overtook her as well, because she knew something that Reese didn't. She had an ace up her sleeve. After weighing the arguments, the judge determined that the case would move to trial if the district attorney's office believed it had sufficient evidence. Amelia's stomach churned. She could be forced to stand trial for something she hadn't done. The system had the power to upend her life completely. She felt Jordan's reassuring hand on her shoulder and straightened her posture. Amelia met Reese's gaze with quiet defiance. Let him enjoy his moment. He had no idea what was coming. 2 days after the preliminary hearing, Amelia received an unexpected phone call from an unfamiliar number. When she answered, a nervous male voice spoke. "Miss Jefferson? My name is Xavier Mitchell. I'm an officer. I've worked with Reese before." Amelia's curiosity piqued. "How did you get my number?" "A mutual acquaintance," Xavier replied, his voice uneasy. I need to talk to you, but not on the record." After a brief discussion, Amelia agreed to meet him at a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city, away from prying eyes. Jordan insisted on accompanying her for safety. That evening, they found Xavier sitting in a booth, a half-finished cup of coffee in front of him. He had a restless energy, his gaze flicking around the room as if expecting Reese to appear at any moment. "Thank you for meeting me," he said in a low voice. I've been on the force for 5 years. I've seen Reese do some questionable things, but I never had proof, never found the courage to speak up. But this time he's gone too far. Amelia leaned in slightly.
I'm listening.
Xavier took a deep breath. Reese lied about you. That night, he told me he got a tip about suspicious activity in the neighborhood, but no such call ever came through dispatch. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But later, I realized his story didn't add up. He went out there deliberately, looking for someone to pin the break-in on. Jordan's jaw tightened. So he was hunting for a scapegoat. Xavier shifted uncomfortably, guilt etched into his expression. He's been known to target Black people walking alone at night in that area. I never realized how far he'd go, until I saw how determined he was to push these false charges against you. He wouldn't let up. He kept insisting that you tried to run, that you were aggressive. But, Miss Jefferson, he hesitated before lowering his voice even more. I saw the dash cam footage, briefly, before it disappeared. Amelia's heart pounded. The dash cam footage existed?
Xavier nudda.
Yeah, and in that footage, you never resisted. You stood there, calm the whole time. A surge of emotions hit Amelia all at once. Relief, frustration, anger. And now it's gone, she murmured. Xavier looked down, his shoulders tense. I think Reese destroyed it, or had someone do it for him. That's a serious offense, but the problem is I don't have a copy. I don't know if anyone else does. But if I'm called to testify, I can swear under oath to what I saw. Amelia exhaled slowly. This was a breakthrough, but not a complete victory. Thank you, she said sincerely. This could change everything. But you do realize if you speak out, you might face serious backlash within the department. Xavier swallowed hard. Yeah, I know. I've been wrestling with that for days. But I can't, in good conscience, let an innocent person be framed. Amelia reached across the table, placing a gentle hand on his. I appreciate your courage. Just be careful. After exchanging contact information, Amelia and Jordan left the diner, both shaken by the revelation. Things were far from over, but now the game had changed. A glimmer of hope sparked within Amelia. Reese's carefully constructed lie was beginning to show cracks, and with Xavier's testimony, she might be able to tear apart the entire false narrative. That night, she called Linda, who was thrilled by the news. This is exactly the kind of witness we need, Linda said. If this case goes to trial and Xavier is willing to testify, the prosecution's case will fall apart. They'll have no choice but to drop the charges or risk a very public humiliation. A wave of relief washed over Amelia, but she remained cautious. Reese was the type to do whatever was necessary to protect himself, even if it meant silencing witnesses. Amelia silently prayed that Xavier would stay safe until the trial. Time moved slowly. Another week passed, and for the first time, Amelia started to see subtle signs that her ordeal might be approaching its conclusion. Detective Marrow seemed more open to acknowledging Amelia's innocence, and the district attorney's office appeared increasingly hesitant about moving forward with the case. Perhaps it was Linda's relentless pressure, or maybe the prospect of a key witness like Xavier, that had them second-guessing. But Amelia's relief was short-lived. One afternoon, a friend inside the department sent her a text. New evidence had been found, evidence that allegedly incriminated her. The message made Amelia's stomach drop. The evidence consisted of photographs showing a woman, dressed identically to Amelia on the night of her arrest, scaling a fence near the site of the break-in. Her friends suspected the images were either doctored or, at the very least, wrongly attributed. The timestamp looked suspicious. A cold dread settled over Amelia. Reese wasn't backing down. He was escalating. That evening, she sat on her couch, staring at her phone screen, scrolling through the so-called evidence. The woman in the grainy photos had braids and wore a similar jacket, but something felt off. The figure's body shape was different, and the timestamp in the corner looked tampered with. Amelia forwarded everything to Linda, fury and fear burning inside her. Reese was forging evidence now. She realized she might have no choice but to play her trump card sooner than planned. If the city was about to be thrown into a high-profile trial, one that threatened her freedom, she wouldn't go down quietly. For years, she had concealed her true identity to protect her mission and her agency. But there were moments when truth was more powerful than secrecy, and Amelia had the distinct feeling that moment had arrived. 2 weeks later, Amelia walked into the Fulton County Courthouse for what was expected to be a pivotal hearing. The district attorney's office had submitted the newly discovered photographs as evidence, hoping to strengthen their case. Linda was prepared to challenge their authenticity. The outcome of this hearing would determine whether Amelia's case would be dismissed or proceed to a full trial. Dressed in a sleek black suit, Amelia walked into the courtroom with her head held high. Jordan followed closely behind, offering silent support. As she took her seat at the defense table, her eyes flickered toward Officer Reese. He leaned back, arms crossed, exchanging hushed words with the prosecutor. His expression radiated arrogance. Amelia forced down the anger simmering inside her. She had to stay composed. The hearing began. The prosecutor presented the photographs, arguing that, combined with Reese's sworn testimony, they placed Amelia at the scene of the break-in. Linda wasted no time tearing into the inconsistencies. She questioned the suspiciously late appearance of these photos and pointed out the discrepancies in the timestamps and physical details. The judge listened carefully, his expression unreadable. Then Linda spoke. "Your Honor, the defense intends to introduce a crucial fact about Miss Jefferson, one that directly impacts her credibility and the plausibility of these charges." The prosecutor immediately objected, calling it irrelevant. But Linda pressed forward. "Miss Jefferson is not just an ordinary citizen," she declared. "She has undergone extensive law enforcement training. In fact, she is a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Jaws dropped. Officer Reese sat up straighter, his eyes widening. Amelia felt the weight of dozens of stares settle on her. The judge peered over his glasses, his lips slightly parted in shock. Linda continued, her voice unwavering. "We have official documentation from the FBI confirming Miss Jefferson's active status. She is well-versed in investigative procedures and would never resist arrest in such an obvious manner. Furthermore, her training gives her the ability to identify and document police misconduct. If she had been at the scene of a crime, she would have had the expertise to avoid detection entirely, assuming she had criminal intent, which she clearly does not." A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Reese's face drained of color. The prosecutor appeared momentarily speechless. Amelia, for her part, took a steady breath, bracing herself for the avalanche of questions that would inevitably follow. The judge banged his gavel. "Order in the court," he said, blinking in astonishment. He turned to Amelia. "Miss Jefferson, is it true? Are you an agent with the FBI?" Amelia stood, her voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I have been with the Bureau for several years. I maintain a cover in my daily life to protect ongoing investigations, but I can confirm that I hold active credentials." She reached into her briefcase, pulled out a slim folder, and handed it to Linda, who passed it to the judge. Inside were official documents verifying Amelia's employment, stamped with the FBI seal. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. The judge studied the documents for a long moment, then lifted his gaze back to Amelia. This revelation completely reframed the prosecution's case. The prosecutor quickly attempted to regain control. "Your Honor, the fact that Miss Jefferson is an FBI agent does not automatically absolve her of any wrongdoing. Even law enforcement officers are capable of breaking the law." Linda gave a curt nod. "We agree, which is precisely why we rely on solid evidence. And in this case, the so-called evidence is compromised, contradictory, and conveniently surfaced at a suspicious time." She then turned to address the court. "Furthermore, we intend to call Officer Mitchell to testify regarding the missing dash cam footage." All eyes shifted toward Xavier Mitchell, who sat in the back of the room, his shoulders tense. He inhaled deeply before rising to his feet and making his way forward. After being sworn in, Xavier recounted how he had personally viewed the dash cam footage, which clearly showed Amelia standing calmly with her hands raised, offering no resistance. He went on to explain how Officer Reese had boasted about targeting Amelia and had taken deliberate steps to conceal the footage. The prosecutor's face tightened with frustration, but it was evident that the momentum of the case was slipping from their grasp. The judge tapped his fingers thoughtfully against the bench. It appears there is significant misconduct surrounding this case. I am inclined to dismiss the charges against Miss Jefferson on the grounds that the evidence is both insufficient and likely fabricated. However, I will allow the prosecution a chance to respond. Caught off guard, the prosecutor fumbled for words, mumbling something about needing time to verify Xavier's statements. But the judge had already made his decision. Miss Jefferson is cleared of all charges, he declared. This court will not proceed with a trial based on questionable evidence and potential perjury. For a moment, silence reigned in the courtroom. Then, behind Amelia, she heard Charisse, Jordan, and others release quiet sighs of relief. Amelia felt something burn deep in her chest, a mix of vindication and lingering anger at everything she had been forced to endure. Across the room, Officer Reese shot to his feet, livid. "Your Honor, if you allow criminals to..." The judge's gavel slammed down with force. "Officer Reese, another outburst from you, and I will hold you in contempt." With that, Amelia's immediate nightmare came to an end. But she knew this wasn't truly over. Reese's lies had been exposed, at least within this courtroom, but Amelia suspected that more revelations were on the horizon. As she rose from her seat, her hands trembled, a combination of relief and fury coursing through her. She had been forced to reveal her true identity in a public courtroom just to secure her own freedom. A small price, perhaps, but one that underscored a larger issue. A system that often left ordinary citizens defenseless against those in power who manipulated the truth. In the hours following the dismissal, Amelia found herself at the center of a media storm. News of an FBI agent being wrongfully arrested by a local officer had leaked, and reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed relentlessly as Amelia and Linda stepped into the sea of journalists. Microphones were shoved toward her and rapid-fire questions came from every direction. About her double life, about corruption in the police force, and about whether her race had played a role in the case. Amelia took a breath before speaking. "I am grateful that justice has prevailed in my case. However, I stand here today not just for myself, but for all those who lack the platform or resources to fight against false accusations. I urge the public to remain vigilant, to question irregularities, and to hold those in power accountable. The truth must be the foundation of every investigation, every arrest, and every trial." Meanwhile, Officer Reese was summoned for a private meeting with Internal Affairs. Amelia didn't have the details yet, but rumors were already circulating that he had been suspended pending an investigation into falsified evidence and body cam tampering. She took no satisfaction in his downfall, but she believed in accountability. Without it, rogue officers would continue to abuse their authority, leaving innocent people at their mercy. As the crowd outside the courthouse began to thin, Detective Marrow approached Amelia quietly in the hallway. His expression was unreadable, but there was something almost apologetic in his gaze. "I had a feeling you were more than you seemed," he admitted, shaking his head. "I'm sorry this happened in my jurisdiction. We let you down." Amelia nodded. "Thank you for not jumping to conclusions," she replied. "At least you were willing to listen to the evidence." Marrow lowered his voice. "Internal Affairs will want to speak with you. I suspect their investigation won't stop at Reese. It's likely they'll be looking at anyone who might have been involved. This could get ugly." Amelia's brows lifted slightly. She was more than willing to cooperate. At the same time, she knew this might also put her under scrutiny from her own agency. FBI agents rarely got involved in local law enforcement cases without stirring political tensions. Still, she was determined to see this through. Later that evening, Amelia, Jordan, and Charisse gathered at Charisse's house for a quiet, celebratory dinner. The tension of the past few weeks still lingered, but the atmosphere was undeniably triumphant. Raising her glass, Charisse offered a toast. to Amelia for standing strong against injustice, and to new beginnings. Their glasses clinked, and Amelia took a moment to savor the victory. Yet, deep down, a part of her remained unsettled. She had revealed her status as an FBI agent. That meant endless questions, from her community, from her colleagues, and from her own mother, who had only ever known the vague cover story Amelia had told her. The phone calls wouldn't stop anytime soon. Jordan leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to Amelia's forehead. "You did it," he murmured. "I'm so proud of you." Amelia exhaled, closing her eyes for a brief moment. "Thank you," she said softly. Then, opening them again, she added, "But it's not over." Jordan's hand found hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Reese is going to face an investigation," she continued, "and I have a feeling I'll be called to testify, this time against him. That's going to be another fight." Jordan gave a small, determined nod. "Then we'll deal with it together." The next few weeks unfolded in a whirlwind of interviews, statements, and closed-door legal proceedings. Internal Affairs subpoenaed Amelia, Officer Xavier Mitchell, and even Detective Marrow to testify about the specifics of Reese's actions. In each session, Amelia recounted the night of her arrest with meticulous precision, describing the fear, the profiling, and the outright lies. Xavier corroborated her account, confirming that the dash cam footage had captured Amelia complying without resistance. Reese, however, remained steadfast in his version of events. He insisted that Amelia had attacked him. When questioned about the missing footage, he blamed a technical malfunction. But forensic analysts were able to recover fragments from the squad car's system, enough to show Amelia standing calmly in front of Reese. The recording cut off shortly afterward, the audio abruptly disappearing, raising serious suspicions that the footage had been deliberately tampered with. During one particularly tense session, Amelia found herself sitting face-to-face with Reese in a conference room at the department's Internal Affairs office. A long table stretched between them, with two investigators seated at either end. Reese's eyes flickered with hostility. Amelia had encountered criminals, terrorists, and far more dangerous individuals in her FBI work, but the personal nature of Reese's betrayal made this confrontation particularly unsettling. "Officer Reese," one of the investigators said evenly, "we have reason to believe that the dash cam footage was intentionally altered. The timeline suggests you were the last person to handle the device. Do you have an explanation?" Reese scowled, refusing to meet Amelia's gaze. "I don't know anything about that. My job was to apprehend a suspect." "You had no reasonable basis to believe Miss Jefferson was involved in any crime, correct?" Amelia interjected, her voice steady despite the way her fists clenched beneath the table. "She fit the description," Reese snapped, "and she was out walking alone at night. And that was enough to justify an arrest? Enough to justify false claims of resistance." Amelia's voice rose slightly. "All because I happen to look like someone you claim to be searching for? Or was it because I'm black and you needed an easy target?" Reese's hand slammed against the table, the impact rattling the metal surface. The Internal Affairs investigators quickly intervened, de-escalating the situation before it spiraled further. Amelia exhaled slowly, refusing to be intimidated. When the session concluded, she walked out with her head held high, Reese's muttered curses trailing behind her. She knew there was no guaranteed victory yet. Internal Affairs investigations were often bogged down by bureaucracy and procedural delays. But the evidence against Reese was piling up, and Amelia hoped for a swift resolution. As the days passed, public outcry intensified. Activists, community leaders, and journalists all demanded justice. Amelia's case had become a lightning rod, drawing attention to the broader systemic issues within local policing. At one point, Amelia received a call from an old friend in the FBI's Public Relations Division. "The Bureau supports you," her friend assured her. "They've publicly condemned the misconduct, but they also want you to tread carefully. Just be mindful of what you say to the press. We can't afford to have this overshadow official statements or compromise any sensitive information." Amelia understood. Balancing personal advocacy with agency protocol was a delicate task. But that didn't mean she would stay silent. If someone like her, an FBI agent trained to handle high-stakes investigations, could be misrepresented and nearly framed, what hope did ordinary citizens have? That question gnawed at her, and she refused to ignore it. A date was set for Reese's internal hearing, where his future on the force would be decided. By then, the pressure had reached a boiling point. The local media was saturated with headlines about the FBI agent arrested for walking while black. Civil rights groups demanded a full review of Reese's past cases, questioning whether he had a history of targeting innocent people. Amelia's phone rang non-stop. Activists, journalists, and legal experts all seeking statements or interviews. She handled each request with caution, refusing to let the spectacle distract from the central issue: accountability. On the morning of the hearing, Amelia arrived at the police administration building in downtown Atlanta. The conference room had the atmosphere of a courtroom. A panel of senior officers and a civilian oversight representative sat at the head of the room. Amelia and Linda took their seats on one side, while Reese and his union representative occupied the other. Detective Merrow, Officer Mitchell, and additional witnesses filled the gallery, prepared to testify. For the next 5 hours, evidence was presented, scrutinized, and dissected. The recovered dashcam footage was played, showing Amelia standing with her hands raised, completely compliant. Reese's inconsistent statements were picked apart, revealing the contradictions in his version of events. Officer Mitchell testified that he had personally seen the original, unaltered footage before it mysteriously disappeared. Forensic experts confirmed that the squad car's recording system had been tampered with, likely by someone with knowledge of the department's internal systems. Desperate, Reese's defense team attempted to argue that Amelia, as an FBI agent, had the expertise to manipulate data and fabricate evidence. Linda swiftly dismantled that claim. "Why?" she asked pointedly. "Would my client go to such elaborate lengths to frame an officer over a routine stop?" The answer is simple: she wouldn't, because the truth is already damning enough on its own. The panel members didn't look convinced by the defense's grasping arguments. As the hours dragged on, it became clear Reese's story was crumbling. His feeble attempts to discredit Amelia only reinforced the reality. He was the one with something to hide. As the mounting evidence stacked against him, Reese's version of events became increasingly implausible. Amelia watched as he squirmed under the relentless questioning. A storm of emotions swirled within her. Anger for the turmoil he had caused, yet a sense of measured satisfaction in seeing him finally held accountable for his actions. Then, in a particularly intense exchange, one of the panel members turned to Reese and asked, "Officer Reese, can you offer any explanation, any at all, for why the missing footage conveniently aligns with the exact time frame in which Miss Jefferson's compliance is clearly evident? If your version of events is true, why would the recording conveniently disappear at the most crucial moment?" Reese gripped the edge of the table, sweat beading on his forehead. For a long, tense moment, he said nothing. Then, barely above a mumble, he muttered, "I can't explain it. It might have been a malfunction." The panel member shook his head, unconvinced. "A malfunction that conveniently supports your narrative while harming Miss Jefferson's? That's quite the coincidence." An uneasy silence settled over the room, broken only by the soft scratch of pens against notepads. Finally, the lead panel officer spoke. "We will adjourn to deliberate." The room emptied, leaving everyone to wait anxiously in the hallway. Amelia stood beside Jordan and Linda, tension coiled in every muscle. Reese's web of lies had crumbled under scrutiny, but now the real question remained. Would the department take full responsibility and hold him accountable? Nearly an hour later, the panel reconvened. Amelia and the others re-entered the room, hearts pounding. The lead panel officer cleared his throat and read from a prepared statement. After a thorough review of all available evidence and testimony, we find that Officer Reese engaged in serious misconduct, including the falsification of official documents, tampering with evidence, and providing false statements under oath. We recommend his immediate termination from the Atlanta Police Department and the initiation of criminal charges for evidence tampering and perjury. A hush fell over the room. Reese's face twisted in a mix of fury and disbelief. He shot to his feet, shouting in protest, but security officers quickly moved in, escorting him out before he could cause further disruption. Amelia's chest tightened. She had anticipated consequences for Reese, but hearing it formally declared brought an overwhelming wave of emotion. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, not of sadness, but of relief. The lead panel officer turned to her. "Miss Jefferson, on behalf of the department, we sincerely apologize for the distress you've endured. We appreciate your cooperation and deeply regret that one of our own violated your rights. We are committed to ensuring such injustices do not happen again." Though the statement was formal, Amelia recognized the sincerity in his tone. She gave a small nod, her voice catching as she murmured, "Thank you." Outside, the world felt bigger and brighter. Reporters crowded nearby, eager for a statement, but Amelia bypassed the cameras. Instead, she and Linda stepped aside for a quiet moment. "We did it," Linda said, gripping Amelia's shoulders. "He's off the force, and he's likely facing charges. This is a victory." Amelia closed her eyes, letting the relief wash over her. "Thank you, Linda. I couldn't have done this without you." Jordan joined them, his smile warm. "Time to celebrate?" A small, tired smile curved Amelia's lips. "Yes, but after everything, I also want to keep pushing forward. There's still work to do. Real change has to follow." Together, they walked away from the building, arms linked. Amelia's heart pounded, not just with triumph, but with an unshakable determination to continue fighting for those who still had no voice in a broken system. In the weeks that followed, Amelia's life shifted in unexpected ways. She continued her duties with the FBI, but she also took on a more public role, speaking out against corruption and racial profiling. With the support of her superiors, who recognized the positive impact her advocacy brought to an agency often met with public skepticism, she began attending community forums and youth outreach programs, sharing her experience and calling for meaningful reforms. Her mother, upon learning the full details of what had happened, wept with both relief and pride. Amelia's extended family embraced her mission, standing firmly behind her. Through it all, Jordan remained her steadfast anchor, encouraging her to balance her activism with self-care. Strangers reached out, some sharing their own stories of injustice, others simply expressing gratitude for her courage. Amelia hadn't set out to become a public figure, but she quickly realized the power of using her voice to inspire change. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Police Department underwent an extensive internal review. More officers came forward, revealing how Reese had intimidated subordinates in the past. The city's mayor announced the formation of a new civilian oversight committee to handle misconduct allegations. Though Amelia knew that one case alone couldn't fix a broken system, the visible steps toward accountability gave her a renewed sense of hope. One late afternoon, Amelia sat at her kitchen table, drafting notes for an upcoming speech at a local college. The topic: bridging the gap between law enforcement and marginalized communities. Her desk phone rang, an internal FBI line. "Agent Jefferson," she answered. Her supervisor's voice came through. "Good news. The higher-ups were impressed with how you handled yourself, both in choosing the right moment to reveal your identity and in advocating for justice. There's an opening in the Bureau's Civil Rights Division. Would you be interested?" Amelia's pulse quickened. "Absolutely," she said without hesitation. "That's my passion." "Expect a formal offer soon," her supervisor replied. "We're proud of you." As Amelia hung up, a broad smile spread across her face. The past months had tested her in ways she never imagined, but they had also led her to a new purpose. She would continue serving her country, now with an even sharper focus, protecting civil rights from within the system and ensuring that no one else fell victim to corrupt authority. As she returned to her speech notes, her mind briefly flashed back to that terrifying night, the moment Reese had handcuffed her on a dark street, her heart pounding with fear and outrage. But that fear had turned into resilience, that outrage into action. With the truth on her side and the courage of allies like Xavier Mitchell and Linda Polk, justice had prevailed. And Amelia Jefferson intended to carry that victory forward, exposing corruption wherever it lurked and reminding the world that even in a flawed system, standing up for what's right still mattered. Her journey, from a disciplined, reserved FBI agent to a relentless advocate for justice, proved one thing: truth could overcome deception, and determination could drive real change. If Amelia's story resonated with you, if it renewed your faith that justice can triumph even against the odds, help keep the momentum going. Like this video, share it with your community, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that illuminate our collective fight for fairness and truth. Together, we are stronger against injustice. By shining a light where darkness prevails, we can forge a better, more just world for everyone.